Yo, what's going on, guys? Chris Bond here, Overtime Athletes. For today's video, what I want to share with you guys is what I call how to become an elite coach. I don't consider myself an elite coach, but it's the direction that I aspire to be. And what I wanted to do was kind of to break down the wherewithal. I often get questions from you guys with emails or direct messages, what my schooling was, or when did I start, how did I start, should you get started. So this was a little bit different direction, more directed towards people who are coaches or aspiring to be coaches, aspire to be great at coaching, right? Because anything worth doing is worth doing great. So what I wanted to do was kind of break down my awareness of what makes an elite coach and what I'm trying to elevate. And just like you do with an athlete, as you analyze the potential they have for each measuring point or each tool that they have, you want to do the same as far as coaching goes. So what I want to do is I want to break it down into 8 different categories. These aren't in any particular order. I'll kind of discuss them in order as we go, but I'll start from the top. First one being psychology. As an elite coach, you know that you have the understanding of the mental game of an athlete, right? Anywhere from knowing what makes them tick and humbling them to get the most out of them each and every session, or pulling them back, to knowing, if your athlete is more of a positive or negative feedback type of athlete. If I give one athlete negative feedback as far as something like, oh, you can't do that, and they respond better, or if an athlete like, hey, great job on that, and they respond better to that. So knowing your athletes, having a basic understanding of psychology, and having a basic understanding of the mental aspect of things, of what makes athlete tick, especially if they're going through a loss, going through a slump, anything of that nature. The next one, which I think is on a high priority, is teach. It's not so much what you're teaching, it's how you're teaching. You could take somebody who's fresh out the master's degree and fresh out the research lab, but if they don't properly know how to coach or get across through cues to be able to get the stimulus that they're trying to achieve to the athlete to overall change them or change the mechanics of what they're trying to do, then you essentially aren't never going to be an elite athlete. So you got to it's not so much that relation to them, it's more or less how you're conveying your words and teaching them. And really through coaching, there's 3 different aspects of that. Obviously it's visual, you performing it, kinesthetic by touch, or verbal, right, by you talking it out. So you want to be good at all 3 of those. The next one I put expertise in, which I think is actually one of the most important, right? Expertise is you as the coach having that confidence no matter where that athlete's at, of knowing you always want to push that boundary. If you're dealing with elite level athletes, you need to match their elite level in your confidence, in your direction of knowing where. A lot of times their personalities are going to be that very ego driven, and to be honest with you, for you to be an elite coach, I believe you need to have that ego driven. You need to have the confidence that you're the best coach, and you need to have that confidence in one particular area. I'm not the best speed coach, but I believe in my heart that I am. So it's one of those things that you need to be able to have and be able to really perfect your craft. Think of this as mastery in your craft, whichever field that is. That could be fat loss, that could be performance training as a whole, it could be speed, it could be power, whatever that is, you want to be able to be an expert in that field and perfect your craft. The next one I put is train. This could be simply thought of as just straight up being able to effectively train somebody. You don't need to know the physiology. You don't need to know the experience, the biomechanics. You don't need to go deep level with that person, but just being able to progressively overload them and over time continue to condition your athlete and continue to build off that stress that we built on the day before or the week before or the month before. That is it's actually a very important factor that I think is often overlooked. So just knowing how to progress your athlete, not necessarily knowing training theory or the physiology, but just knowing how to progress them. Next is the physiology and how all the internal processes take place, whether this be energy systems or even down to stretch shortening cycle, stretch reflexes, things in an internal level, or even adding nutrition. I think as a coach, you need to have a good solid base of most of that, and especially when it pertains to your expertise. The next one is experience. This is something that comes over time, so it'll be in a lower ranking, but it's very important, obviously, because as you gain experience, you know with each athlete that you work with, you're continuously perfecting that craft, right? And as you gain that experience, you can simply be able to utilize, not be able to utilize as much tools, but more of the internal tools that you've gathered throughout the years. So experience is extremely important. That comes with just simply time and the amount of athletes that you're able to train, or people that you're able to train. The next one is biomechanics, right? You need to have a basic understanding of how the body integrates and how it moves in order to basically be able to put them in the best situation or angle possible to develop or get the best result that we're looking for. When I think of biomechanics, I closely relate that to essentially physics, and that's just knowing how the body moves and how we're trying to essentially critique or make the body produce the most efficient movement mechanically. Finally, I put athlete, which is on the bottom rung. I believe for you to be an elite coach, when I put athlete, it's not necessarily that you needed to be a former athlete. I think some of the best coaches were former athletes, but I will say this: they were former athletes who didn't have that ability to take it to that final level or that next level that they aspired to be, whether that be the professional level. So they kind of have a chip on their shoulder, and they almost kind of live vicariously through that athlete. And that really gives them that drive, not necessarily the motivation. It's that driving factor that looms on them every day to try to make that person better. It's their way of paying it forward in their lifetime, and that's what I think is really important for a coach to have. Now, the other side of this, that if you weren't an athlete or weren't able to be an athlete, it's your ability to be able to go through something before you prescribe it to somebody else. I know within myself, one thing that I do is I often perform a program or do go through it before I actually start to prescribe it. So you kind of knowing internally what that athlete's going through. That's what I should really say, is what is that athlete going through? Whether it be coaching, whether it be the recruiting process, no matter what it is, if you can relate to them. I put athlete here because you have a relation with that athlete, and you can not only be able to build upon that, and that companionship, but also the other side of that coin is to be able to know what that athlete's going through rep by rep as you're pushing them and trying to raise them through great levels. One that I haven't put on here that you can add as a ninth one, I don't think you need to have this skill to be an elite coach. However, I notice a lot of elite coaches have, and that's a business mindset. When it comes to the business mindset, the thing is here's the thing: you could be the best coach in the world, but if you don't have anybody to train, you're never going to have athletes to be able to develop your skills and become an elite coach. So that's one that you can add to it as well. But I also know a lot of elite coaches that have partnered up with great business people, and they're the ones that are essentially being able to produce athletes for them to essentially coach. However, I do know that you need to be able to sell your program to create that buy-in, right? You need to be able to convey enough to get that athlete on board and trusting you. And that comes with all of these factors. So what I wanted to do was just basically break this down. So just like I do when I self-audit any athlete or evaluate any athlete, we evaluate the potential. So if you want to become an elite coach, I consider you a strong practice on a yearly basis, and this is what I do on a yearly basis, is to self-audit yourself on every level and see what your strengths and weaknesses are, and see how you can continue to improve. And one thing that I often do is, if there is something that I can improve on with any of these aspects, I'll actually go and put myself into learning and focusing on that aspect for that year to, again, obtain that tool to put in my toolbox so that I can carry that out there and continue to become an elite coach overall. I hope this helps. This is for some of you coaches out there. Drop a comment. Let me know if you guys are coaching, if you guys are wanting to be coaches, and I'll holler at you guys next time.